everybody. It is Felicity from Penguin Teen, and I am so excited to have you all come to one of probably going to be my favorite events of all time, which is the Penguin Teen A Sky Beyond the Storm spoiler event. This is the first time we get to talk directly, publicly, not aggressively, but specifically. Oh, Sabaa's already sneezing under pressure. About A Sky Beyond the Storm and all the amazing, epic things that happened to finish this series out. But first of all, let's welcome the lady of the hour, Sabaa Tahir.
Hello. How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm good, and I just want to really quickly say thank you to our interpreters tonight. Brian and Jenny are going to be doing ASL interpretation for us, and so hopefully for the people out there who have been asking for that.
Yes, thank you very much for remembering to say that. Thank you, that's great. I want to ask you before we get into spoilers, and I'm going to remind everybody many times before I start digging in, because I don't want anyone to yell at me in the comment section. I'm going to be asking very specific A Sky Beyond the Storm plot points. So if you haven't read the book, this is not the chat for you. You will be spoiled. It will be all bad. I will ruin the book. In a good way, the book's amazing, but I will ruin you enjoying the plot points of the book. So just prepare yourselves. But before we do, I want to ask you, it came out December 1st. It's been 2.5 months now almost. What is that like for you in terms of how is that fan reaction in that early first couple of days?
It was really bonkers. I didn't actually expect the reaction that I got, but it was very warm, very positive, like overwhelmingly positive. I mean, I think in general, I am fortunate in that the Ember fan base is a pretty nice fan base. So if people don't like the book, they're not going to tell me that. Like they might tell each other, but they're not going to share that with me, which I really appreciate. But people were wonderful. They sent me, these long messages about what the series meant to them, what the book meant to them, what the covers meant to them, what the characters meant to them. And that was very moving. And I was really emotional for those first couple of weeks. I was like staying up late at night and like writing in my journal about like how it felt, because I was like, I don't know if this will ever happen to me in my life again.
Right.
So, it was just a very, your first series is your first series. And I don't think that there's anything like that. So it was really incredible because it was a very cathartic moment for me to have it in the world. And then I felt like I was so worried that I wouldn't have, any tour events, I wouldn't get to see readers. But I actually think that in a weird way, this kind of like having it be all online and virtual allowed readers to feel comfortable saying the things that maybe they wouldn't have felt comfortable sharing in a public space. Like they felt like they could write me because they know that's not going anywhere, right? That's just in my mentions or in my DMs, and that's it. So that was really wonderful.
Yeah. And I think there's something, about the virtual events that allowed so many more people to maybe see you or hear from you in a way that if you were touring to physical bookstores, they wouldn't have been able to. So was that obviously a new style of touring for you, but was it exciting to sort of have that accessibility?
I was going to say, I love the fact that there was so much more accessibility because I think that there are a lot of readers out there who live in places where they're not close to these bigger bookstores. I know that when I was a kid, I lived in a tiny town where there were never any book events. I didn't go to a book event till I was in my 20s. The first book event I went to was Chuck Palahniuk, the author of Fight Club. It wasn't Fight Club. It was this book he wrote called Lullaby. But that was the very first author event I ever went to, and that was in college. So I think it's really lovely and wonderful that there's much more accessibility for people who couldn't get to these events otherwise, or who aren't comfortable going to events because a lot of people aren't comfortable with that number of people. So
I've got to say, the comments are already on fire, and everyone is loving the Kahani shirt. I think it's amazing.
Thank you.
Yeah.
This is part of my merch. This is going to be on sale on sabaatahir.com in just probably like a month or so. I'm just working out. This is actually, my samples just came in, so I just got this sample a few days ago, and I was like super excited to wear it. So
amazing.
You guys can all have your own very soon.
I feel like it's like fashion show at work.
Yeah. I have like these. I have like giant boxes of like shirts and mugs and like all this cool stuff that came in. It's really fun. I've been wanting to do this for a long time because I've had people ask me like, you know, I want to get an Always Victorious mug. I want to get, you know, what's your favorite quote? I want to put that on a, you know, a notebook, whatever. And I just haven't had the opportunity. And now that like the series is done, I'm like, okay, let's do this. It just takes forever. So I've been teasing it for like 6 months.
Sorry, well, this is a good. No, this is a great sign. And the comments, everyone is loving the shirt and thinking you look gorgeous with the shirt. Great color on you is a lot of the comments. Yeah. So like, this is just instant pre-orders are happening right now. I can tell.
I know. I should have like gotten this site up and running before I wore it, but
no, this is a good exclusive tease for everybody who came tonight. This is why if you come to events, you get exciting rewards. But exactly. I feel like we've given people enough time. Again, I'm going to remind you all, it's a Sky Beyond the Storm spoilers. If you haven't read this book, go. I'm not going to apologize. I'm not going to apologize anymore if you get spoiled. So let's do this. Here we go. I'm going to stretch my arms for this. I'm going to go in a little bit of chronological order because I don't want to like go straight into the things that you did. But first of all, the book opens with Helene and Laia being badasses together and like getting it done. And I'm like, I was loving it. It obviously was a bit of a transformation. We saw a hint of that in Reaper, a little bit of a hint of that, but like, did you just want to write a whole book about them going off together and fighting?
You know, I felt like Laia and Helene would probably never be best friends, right. But I think that they value what the other person can offer them, right? Mm-hmm. So they're both very smart women, and they look at the other person and they realize like, hey, this person can help me. And they also see a little bit of themselves in the other person, even if that's sometimes uncomfortable, right? Mm-hmm. Or sometimes they see a little bit of what they want to be in the other person. So I think they're good for each other in that way. I think that they're the type of people who, as time goes on, they're going to sort of realize that these things that sort of kept them from being friends when they were younger, or that would have kept them from being friends, aren't as important as they thought they were, as they kind of try to build a new future for their people together.
Yeah. And I think so much of what they go through too in Sky with like Darren and Liver, like there's a similar, like you said, they're two sides of two different coins of the same, whatever that, I can never think that. Yeah. Two sides of the same coin?
Two sides of the same coin, yeah.
There you go. That's what it is.
There's, and you know, sometimes I think about if Laia had grown up in the situation, like a lot of people dislike Helene, which I understand. She's not, you know, I was always really surprised when people loved her because I was like, she's kind of villainous, guys. But, right. But at the same time, I get it. People do love villains. But ultimately, she sort of has this very, very big, you know, change to her personality and to who she is, and she's sort of woken up and realizes, you know, what she's gotten wrong all these years, and she still has a long way to go. But I mean, she's only 21 or 22; she's very young, so she still has time. Mm-hmm. And so, you know, I think that she is just a character who it's easy to dislike. And I think that if Laia had been in her situation, it would be interesting to see like if Laia had grown up as a member of that class, if Laia had gone to that school, like how would she have reacted to that? How would she have been any different? Would she have had empathy earlier? Would she have, you know, not bought in, ever drunk the Kool-Aid? Would she have been more like Elias? Probably, right? Mm-hmm. So that's when you kind of can see the differences between the characters.
Yeah. Yeah. I want to call out a comment. April Source wanted to say that she loved the scene with the braiding of the hair.
Oh, yeah.
and a lot of people also agree that the braiding of the hair was amazing. And then also the friendship element too of two powerful women being friends. Like, obviously, attention friendship, but...
Yeah, they're being friends and they're kind of looking at each other thinking, like, what would life have been like if we could have just been in a world where we were friends? And that as a microcosm of the bigger issue of what would the world look like if people like us could be friends, if people like Helene could set aside what they have been taught and what they have accepted and what they have internalized their whole lives. And people like Laia were able to forgive them for what they've done, which is not necessarily something people like Laia should have to do, right? So but she does. She makes that choice. And so I do think that it's and I really love their moments together. It was really funny because as I was writing, I was kind of starting to ship them a little bit. I was like, oh, they're so good together.
That's what I mean. Especially in the early scenes when they were running around in the palace, I'm kind of like, I could do a whole like book about this. Like these two kick-ass girls who have a tension of friendship and have a like there's there, but also respect each other. Like let's go on that for a little bit. But,
yeah, and if you want a really good series with female friendships, Susan Dennard's Witchland series has that element, and it's really beautifully done. I love that series for that exact reason.
I do like what you said, though, particularly about you didn't have to have Laia forgive Helene, because I think the way you wrote that too, it happened, but it wasn't a judgment call either way of this is what I want everyone to take from this story. It was a this is happens, this is right for her and this character, but like you don't have to forgive someone who's wronged you that way.
Yeah, you don't, and I don't think that I don't actually think it makes any sense to tell any like the idea of like blanket forgiveness has always been confusing to me because it's like, how do you know how something affected a person?
Right.
You don't know. There are some things that maybe can be forgiven and there are some things that can't. Laia chose to forgive. Mamie did not. Mamie was like, I'm not forgiving you. Like, no, why would I forgive you for what you did to me? So, you know, they and they're both good people. And they're both worthy, wonderful people. They just have different opinions on this, and I think that's okay.
I agree. All right, it's time to talk about my favorite broken boy, Elias. And he's my broken boy because like I was so nervous heading into Sky because I'm like at the end of Reaper, he had kind of resigned himself to I'm the soul catcher. This is my job. I will forget, and I'm going to deliberately forget. But then in Sky, when the chapter headings switched back, I almost lost it. I'm not even kidding.
It was so wonderful to type his name in that chapter. I was like waiting for it. I on purpose, even though like I write out my chapters long before, I don't put the numbers. I'll usually just put an initial for who it is. And so when I finally got to type out Elias, I was like, yes.
He obviously went through so much. And the question always is did you know he was going to be able to fight back? Or was there times when no, Elias's dark journey was dark and was going to stay dark?
No, I knew he was going to fight back. Like, look, I mean, I can say this now because this is a spoiler event. So
yes, you can.
I have shipped Lion Elias from day one. Like, I don't think there was ever a question about that when people would send me like Lion Elias fan art. I'd be like, whoa, Lion Elias fan art. And you know, if people sent me, you know, Helene Elias fan art, I was like, oh. So I mean, I love these two characters, but I think that I was sort of looking at them the way an auntie looks at the situation, where I'm like, how can I make them compatible for life? Right? So like, how can I make it so that they last, you know, their love lasts and they have a family and they have, you know, a future together. And I really think that Laia might have been there early, but she needed to sort of go through a lot and find her voice and her power and her strength. And Elias needed to forgive himself. And that was really his journey. Like, he didn't have sort of the classic hero's journey of, you know, he's finding his courage or he's, you know, learning to lead an army or whatever. He knows how to do all that, right? Like that was his whole childhood. He needed to forgive himself and to love himself. And I think that that's something that he had to get to before him and Laia could have a fair, level playing field, true, good relationship.
Yeah. Oh, for me, it was always he was de-escalating out of this heightened, evolved war state, like, and she was escalating into her power, and they kind of were like, you know,
and they kind of meet,
elevators who are meeting on the right floor,
right?
But like, of course, through mountains of pain and trauma and strife to get there. So I was just, yeah, like you had to burn us a little bit to break us to get it back to it. But like, were you physically? I can almost imagine as you wrote that Elias chapter switch, the physical relief that you would have had. Like, just...
it was so joyful. Like, look, I usually get into, I sort of skid into the end of my books and I'm like freaking out and deadline is coming and I'm really late. And I'm not saying that didn't happen. I definitely clawed across the finish line of this book, like bloodied and broken and like, but it was with so much joy because I got to the end of the book and it felt perfect and it felt right. And his story felt really complete. And, you know, it's no secret that, you know, he's, you know, probably the character who I relate to the most. He's the character I see myself in the most. So to be able to give him a joyful ending where he is able to love himself was really, really wonderful and like cathartic.
No, it was just, there was no, the ending for me, for him particularly, was peace. Like, all I felt for him was he could rest. And I just was like, oh, bless him. He's okay now. I don't have to worry my nights for that poor boy. But speaking of his other half, which we'll get to in a minute, don't you worry. But Laia, she went through it in this series, but even in this book, like, I think back to, for the series, of like the girl that we met in her grandparents' place waiting for her brother to come home to what we end with is just like, wow.
Yeah, her journey was huge.
The same question of, did you know she was going to make it through? Was there any thoughts of changes? Was she always going to come into this? And then I think my specific question is, and I'm probably mispronouncing this wrong, but talk to me about the Djinn Queen. Is that how I'm saying it?
Yeah, the Djinn Queen. The
Djinn Queen in her, and how that came about, because that was fascinating.
Okay, so the first thing is I actually thought about killing Elias, and people have been asking me this question forever. I had thought about, I had planned that he was going to live, and then I had this brief period where I was like, maybe I should kill him off, and I had kind of justified it to myself. Then I talked to my mom, and my mom was like, are you joking? Like, if you kill him, I'm going to kill you. Like, you'll be dead. So then I was like, okay, well, mama says no, so I can't do it. But back to Laia. Laia, I knew, I was like, she's gonna survive. I knew that she was gonna go through something really difficult. I knew how she was gonna grow, and I really tried to think of Laia in terms of her impact over the series. So, you know, she impacts a few lives in the first book, and then it sort of gets bigger with the second and bigger with the third until she is sort of a world-changing person in the last book, and that is kind of someone she's developed into. In terms of the Djinn Queen, that idea of this thing living inside of her was planned from the very beginning. So it's actually in, I think it's the second chapter of Ember, or maybe the third chapter of Ember. Sorry, I can't remember. But there's a point at which she sort of thinks to herself, disappear, and she does.
Right.
And it's when the house is being raided, and that is her magic and her power. Now later she's like, oh, it got activated by the Efrit, but that's not true. It had been active before that. Like, there's times where Elias is you know, following them through as her and Izzy go to the Moon Festival, and he like can't see them. He's like, wow, she's like really blending into the dark. It's the same thing. So it's like these little things that were planned through. I mean, it was 13 years spent on this series, and the first 6 years, a lot of it was planning and trying to figure out how to make it work. And I think that's why I was able to write the series the way I did and have sort of drop these big moments and drop these big plot twists, because it was all set up ahead of time. So some of these like the Keenan plot twist, right, where Keenan ends up being the bad guy, it was just like so much fun. I took so much joy in drawing that plot twist.
No, because he was so, like, you set him up so well.
Right. And I had imagined that from the beginning, you know, this character, and you know, so I have like these little and it's funny because I'll have people write to me and they'll be like, oh my God, that sentence in chapter such and so where you say, as if the Nightbringer himself is on our tail. And I'm just like, like, you know, it's like I'm a dork. So I find that very funny. This is, you know, how you entertain yourself when you sit alone in an office for most of your day writing.
Well, I will say a lot of people are very thankful to Mama Tahir there, because
yes.
I was, and then all
Mama Salim, but yes.
Mama Salim, sorry, yeah.
Yes.
So many people are like, thank you. She deserves all the prizes, and that was the number one question in the DMs today, of people asking, who was the character that you were going to kill that your mum talked you out of?
Yeah, so I had really kind of justified. I was like, well, it's what would happen. He would totally sacrifice himself. That's what he would do. And she was just like, I will never forget the look on her face, which is like, if you've ever seen the meme of the cat that looks like you've offended its ancestors, it's like, like that.
Yes.
That was my mom. She was just like, no.
I mean, I went in thinking you were going to do it. I got to say, there was people in the office, and we had a little pool who was going to survive, and Elias was not looking good.
Poor Elias.
Yeah, I just think
you guys didn't give him enough credit. He's very hardy, and he's victorious. And as Quinn Victorious says, Quinn's like, you'll be fine. We live a really long time. So.
I know, but I was just like, you wanted to break me, and I was ready for breaking. That, like, thank God you didn't do it. So obviously, let's talk about my favourite couple. And you are known for your battle scenes, the brutality, all of that. But, excuse me, missus, a sky beyond the storm swoon factor that was in some of those scenes. And I'm going to read the quote that, okay, I'm just going to read it because I love it. But, I wish I could live 1,000 lives so I could fall in love with you 1,000 times.
All right, so I have a confession to make, which is that this was a line that was used on me by my husband.
Oh.
And I was like, do you mind if I steal this for my book? Because, like, it was such a beautiful thing to say. And it was, like, right as we were about to get married. And so he very kindly allowed me to thieve that for Sky.
I mean, that's a great line. B, a great husband. So nice work there.
Yeah, no, there's so many things all across the books that are inspired by him. It's sort of funny because I say that these books are a love letter to women, right? And to our strength and to all the women in my life, right? But they're also kind of a love letter to him. So it's both.
I mean, but I do think that's an interesting part of some of the men in this book do have that, the women that they love, like, and that's a really strong part of it. And you see that in the Nightbringer, you see that in Elias, you see it for better or worse in some really terrible people, but these men love these women.
Yeah, they really do. And I think that sort of goes back to the power of these women, right? And sort of their, and also not really wanting to write men that kind of drift from thing to thing. Like I wanted the men in this book to be, to not sort of have so much of the kind of toxic masculinity that you saw in a lot of old fantasy. It's still there. There are things that Elias says in the first book that he sort of kicks himself for, and he's like, I can't believe I said that. You see him learning, you see him getting better as time goes on, but again, it takes time, right? Like the one thing for me was that I was like, this is 4 books. It is a 4-book arc. It's not, this person is going to go from being, a cub to a lion in one book. That, to me, that didn't seem realistic. And I couldn't get over the not realisticness of it. Like, I think it's the journalism background. I just couldn't wrap my head around it. I was like, no, I have to have a slower arc. I have to have slower growth that's real. So, people were annoyed, but what are you going to do?
Yeah. I mean, it's really, as you said, it's realistic and it earns out in the end. Now, I will say in the comments, I am seeing people talk about the lag, and I apologise. Apparently, there's a bit of a lag on the feed, and so they're getting a little bit of a disrupted one. It's back now, it looks like, but we just had an interrupted lag. So we hopefully will iron out all those details. But everyone's looks like comments are back and active, so people are coming into it again. One of my other favourite quotes was, "May death claim me first." And he's like, "Oh no, my love, it gathers me close. You cannot go first. I would not make sense of the world if you did." Were you just like saving up all of this through the hard times of Torch and Reaper for these moments? Because I literally was like crying happiness.
Yeah, I was. That was, Emifal Ferdant was. It's like something that, like my people kind of say, and like, but in different ways. So like, there's something that my mother says when she sees my children, and there's like not really a translation for it, but it's basically like, I will sacrifice myself to you. Like brown people don't say I love you, right? We're like, I will spill my blood on the floor because I just love you so much. You know, like that's kind of how like within Urdu and Punjabi and Farsi and Arabic and across actually I think a lot of South Asia and the Middle East there is some of that. I don't know quite as much if you see that in East Asian cultures or in European languages. I'm not sure, but I know that in Urdu and in Hindi and in Farsi, you definitely see this.
All right, everyone, welcome back. We are going to fix this problem. We are going to take ourselves to Zoom webinar, and so I'm going to put in the chat the Zoom link, and we're going to talk a little bit more so that you've got time to head on over here. But we invite you to join us at 7:40, which is 5 minutes away from now, to come over and hear this conversation without any lags. It can be nice and clean. No one has to worry about it. And that way, hopefully, if you don't have Zoom, we will be recording this and we will upload to the Penguin YouTube channel. So if you can't join us on Zoom, you'll be able to hear the second part of this conversation and you won't miss out on any of the activity. And we apologise for the technical difficulties that we're having. Hopefully you're patient and we're sorry, but join us in 5 minutes over at the webinar and we'll get started there. Otherwise, you can stay here and chat amongst yourselves because you're having a great conversation and I want you all to enjoy the fans as well. So thank you everyone for your patience. The link should be there in the chat and we will be heading over there right now and we'll start officially in about 4 minutes time and resume the conversation. So thanks everyone and we'll see you in Zoom shortly. Bye.